Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Thought I'd get us together and do a weekend live stream. Happy Saturday, happy Sunday, whatever day it is, wherever you may be. I know we got people from all over the world join this crazy Bitcoin day. It just, oh man, the fun just never ends, right? So I thought I'd take a look at the chart, do a quick weekly recap of some of the action we saw over the last couple of days here. The FUD storm that hit on Wednesday, and we saw a decent little bounce. We're seeing some pullback now, as you can see, and so I'm sure there's a lot of questions around, hey, what do we do? What's the next downside target, the upside target? Honestly, I was really thinking we would see a green day today, and so I'll go into some of that. And I also want to take a look at the longer term time frames, right? The weekly, and do a comparison of the 2014 action we saw and how this compares. And if we use that same precedent, the projections that this will convey in terms of downside longer term. And so there we go. So how long will this video be? I'm going to try to limit it to around 45 minutes, no more than 1 hour. And so I will leave time in the second half for sure to do a little bit of some chart action, some reviews that you guys want to look at, and we'll go from there. So BTC's pulling back here a little bit. I will get in depth a little bit more on some of this action. I'm going to cover some of the weekly recap first, but we bounced yesterday. I posted a quick video update. We bounced right into that resistance, the neckline basically that broke down over the bigger term double top that we're seeing. Couldn't get above. We're seeing some pulling back in here. We've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down days in a row. Now this current daily bar still has about 5 hours left to go. And so I'm going to be watching to see if we can at least get a little bit of a reversal. Right now, this seems like a pretty good hammer bottom. So maybe we see a little bit of a dip, another test to the downside, and a reversal. And there still is a chance that this could turn green before the end of the day, before 5 hours. We got to close above 92.20 or whatever that is. 92, what do we get? 92.24, give or take, 92.25 will turn us green for the day, and it may turn into another little bit of a hammer if that turns green. And then we could see a little bit of a bounce from there. We're a little extended still to the downside. I mean, the 10 EMA, the declining 10 EMA is still up here near 10K. And so that's why I was thinking we would see at least a little bit of a bounce. But man, no bounce in sight. It's certainly looking weak, to say the least. And we'll get into more details there as far as what I think. So weekly recap. On Wednesday, we had the FUD storm that hit with several things taking place at once. The first one being, not that, the first one being, you know, the regulation, the talk of uncertainty, CFTC, this guy's ugly mug on all the websites. I mean, that just caused the smackdown to really accelerate. And because the uncertainty, right? It doesn't matter what market you're in, stocks, commodities, cryptos, markets in general just do not like uncertainty. And so anytime there's rumors of potential changes, rumors of regulation, and we just don't have the full picture, then it just causes more fear and uncertainty than anything else. And so that's what we saw, right? That was the SEC came out and said, warning investors around unregulated exchanges. And, you know, there certainly are some that have licenses, but a lot of them don't. And what does that mean? Does that mean that they're going to have to become licensed? Do they got to share user information with the governments? Do they got to register and limit certain ICOs from being traded? So there's just a lot of uncertainty around that, and rightly so. But unfortunately, and, you know, I've kind of been saying this since last year, especially once the space really started to accelerate and get a lot more attention, is regulation was coming. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us, guys. The regulation is coming, will continue to be here. This space is growing rapidly. It's very lucrative from an exchange perspective. And so there's different people that are going to want in, and there's going to be taxes that are going to be wanted to be taken. So this was a big news. And also the CFTC here in the United States, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, essentially ruled that there was a judge that ruled that Bitcoin is a commodity, not a cryptocurrency. And so that's the other thing here, right? There's still a lot of uncertainty. I live in Arizona, and Arizona has lately been very pro crypto in terms of their regulation. They passed a law recently that you could pay certain taxes with crypto. And so then that goes against this, right? It's not a commodity, it's a currency, it's a medium of exchange. SEC can't still figure out, are ICOs securities? I think some of them are, but not all of them. And you can see here, right, there's, highly risky and volatile, but putting them all into a single category, I think, is very stifling. The governments tend to overreach generally when they do stuff like this. And unfortunately, it will impact innovation because, I mean, think about an ICO, right? If you're raising it to fund a business, if you're creating a new token, then, there's elements of that are security types, right? You're kind of bypassing the normal venture capital system, the seed rounds. But at the end of the day, it's like, who cares, right? This is a different form of crowdfunding. Let investors invest if they want. But then there's other tokens that are created for maybe very specific use cases, reward systems, points, gaming, stuff like that. Those should not be called securities. They should just be tokens. I mean, so there's just different things. So that was Wednesday's SEC latest. The other thing we saw was Binance. Now, that was an interesting story, a very elaborate, coordinated attack, a phishing scam, a big one. A lot of accounts were taken, but this had a nice ending to it. Binance very quickly isolated the accounts that were the culprits. The hackers' alarms set off, and they were unable to profit from this. If anything, they lost on this. And so that's pretty interesting to see that. And it's kind of a nice story. They reversed everything. They froze this account, but it was a pretty elaborate phishing scam. So guys, be careful out there. There's always going to be attacks on your crypto and people trying to steal it and take it. And this was an interesting twist on that one. And I don't know why they chose VIA, other than maybe it's a small cap coin and they're trying to really pump it volume wise, but very interesting to see there. But the big story, Mt. Gox, in my opinion, this is the bigger story, right? Security, SECs, blah, blah. I mean, that's going to happen. That's big, no doubt. But this sold off 40,000, almost 40,000 BTC Bitcoin Cash over the course of 2018. But the fact that they still have 160, almost 160,000 worth, 160,000 BTC still potentially to sell, that's a lot of overhead supply that someone seemingly with no interest in the crypto markets can control. And at this point, they've had no interest in doing over-the-counter trades and dark pools and try to go through back channels to have other large buyers step in. And they're just going to the open market, which is crazy because they could get more money if they would do it the other way or auction it off. But this is a little bit of a headwind right now, in my opinion. And it changes the fundamental story until some of this resolves itself, because it's a big risk of potentially more dumping, which will near term hurt prices. Longer term, it's probably a good thing because it's going to decentralize it a little bit more, and there's going to be smaller, big pools out there, less of them at least. But it's going to be interesting to see if they come up with an agreement or some sort of alternative way of disposing of their BTC as opposed to just transferring them out on exchanges. Now, what I'm going to be watching is going to be the transactions, right? So people have been able to isolate which addresses are associated with this, and it looks like they're in batches of 2,000 BTC. And so I'm betting there's going to be a high watch on all of these addresses. And anytime we see some movement from these addresses, you could potentially see a little dip in the price as people maybe anticipate, uh-oh, here comes another sale of BTC. And that's going to be interesting to see if this now becomes a factor in driving the price. And so that's going to be another thing to be watching here. So a couple of things happened this week. It certainly was a wild week, another crazy week as always, but let's check it out here. So looking at the charts, yesterday I posted a short video. This is BTC 1 hour on Binance, and I'll flip through a couple of different exchanges just to kind of analyze it a little bit here differently. So what I was looking at here, we were watching this uptrend off of the bounce. It kind of formed a little bit of a wedge. We're seeing that break down right now. Not a clear tight wedge like we've seen in the past, but you could say there was a little bit of wedging action here. But more specifically, we bounced right into resistance here, which was the neckline that broke on this big double top, right? So you can see that was that $9,300, $9,400 area. And once we broke, it was a pretty quick acceleration. We found support around 8,300 for now, 83.84. And it's not unusual to see a bounce and to retest that resistance. And that's what we saw. And I was hopeful that maybe we pause a little bit, consolidate before, and then break through to the next resistance level, which would have been around 9,900, 10K. But you always got to watch. And it was kind of really building this tight range. And look at these 4-hour bars prior to this most recent action we saw. It was just sitting really tight here, and was similar picture on other exchanges. You can see here on Bittrex, see here on Bitstamp. And so that was just interesting to see how tight that was. A big move was coming one way or the other. And so I've kind of just been sitting tight waiting to see next move. And so far, the next move has been this big down, well, not big, but it's pretty decent quick move here in the last hour or so, last 2 hours. And so this current bar, 4-hour bar, has another hour, less than an hour, 40 minutes to go. And so unless we see some big volume reversal here, it's not looking good because these were lower volume. The buy volume has been very weak, unfortunately, on this bounce. And so unless we see some big reversal action here near term, this chart is leaning bearish again. And so I'm going to remain cautious here, guys. Just got to sit tight, be patient, let this thing kind of work itself out. In terms of my trading account, I continue to remain 100% in cash. Not doing any trading here. Yesterday, we saw some pretty decent bounces in the alts, but I've just kind of been patient waiting this out. I was hoping this little consolidation would have confirmed and broke out to the upside. Then I would have been a lot more comfortable getting a little more aggressive. So for now, my next step is to watch where the dip lands and see if we can set up a higher low and then start marching higher again and retesting the support. If we can establish a pretty good higher low, then that will certainly start to confirm that, hey, maybe near term, the momentum is shifting. And that was a pretty good intermediate near term low around $8,300, $8,400. So that's what I'm going to be watching here on the daily. Again, I'm just watching this going, how many red days in a row can we have? I think this is the longest streak we've seen since like November. So it's been a pretty long down streak in terms of consecutive red days in a row. And so eventually we're going to see some green. Eventually, it's just how low does it get before we get there? Another thing to look at that's real interesting here, if you kind of zoom out and take the longer term picture, I've got it drawn here on my chart. Let me get the RSI off here and just clear the chart a little bit to kind of show you guys some of that. But there's this longer term trend that's been in place since about March, April of last year, which was the low. In my opinion, this is where the big bull really started, just sub $1,000 mark, because that was the prior high was just above that, and this was the last big dip before we saw the run up to 20K. And so if you look at this line, I mean, there's this long trend line that's here in place right now, and we tested it, undercut it briefly, but closed above it here during the big sell-off in February. And we tested it again just the other night when we sold off to that $8,300, $8,400 mark. And so this could be establishing itself as a near-term trend line of support. Now, to be fair, the angle of this line is relatively steep. I mean, it's basically a 45-degree angle. And so it's going to be a tough hold, in my opinion, just because it's unusual to see that strong of a trend for so long before the price at least goes sideways and begins to negate that. But that's going to be an interesting trend line to be watching here. Another thing to watch too is I don't plot it too often on my charts just because there haven't been too many really strong support levels on this line. But here is the 200-day moving average. And we are right at it again. We undercut it briefly yesterday, and we're testing it again. We saw it undercut here during this February sell-off, but closed above it. And that's a major long-term line. And so that's going to be interesting to see that. If we begin to live below the 200-day, that is very bearish in terms of the overall market strength. And so traditionally, those longer-term timeframes, once you start to get below them, just really confirms that, hey, the market's just, this trend is continuing to be lower. And until we get above that, we want to see that kind of go sideways. So let's kind of segue into the longer term picture here, the weekly charts. Let me hide these lines and moving averages here just to kind of set the stage a little bit. So here is the weekly view on Bitstamp. And so this is September of 2013 down here. We had that big run up that basically took us from $100 to over $1,000 in a number of very few weeks. That was much steeper of an acceleration and parabolic move than the one we saw back here, even though the price here was huge, but this was a percent-wise much steeper. And so a lot of people are talking about, hey, we're going to live another bear market like this. We're going to see something similar to what we saw in 2014, and it's going to take years to play out, and we're going to go down 85%. And so is that realistic? And so I am in the camp of, while we still could see some further downside and some consolidation before it goes higher, I don't believe we're going to see this type of duration before we start to head higher again. This was, almost 2 years. I mean, this was a long bear market. It was about 18, 19 months. And so the market certainly is a little bit more mature now, a little bit different in terms of what happened back here, even though we're still living with this Mt. Gox scenario, surprisingly. But it's a little bit different in terms of the market maturity and the level of interest that we saw back here. Bitcoin was very young, still very in that, people were still not sure if Bitcoin was even going to survive and be around. And we've seen a lot of innovation happen since then. But if we look at the price action that we saw in 2014, going from the very top to the very low, and it's kind of hard to see, but there is a little wick down here. I mean, the candle body takes you down about 81, 82%, but there's a little wick that had that sell-off. That was the climactic bottom around, $160, $100 or so. That was 86% from the peak, and that took 59 weeks to get there. So 59, 60 weeks to get to that extreme low. Now you can see the first big low before the big pop, we went down around 70%. And then we had a pretty decent rally, which went up 103%. And then we saw that next leg down, another rally, another leg down, and that culminated in that ultimate low. So fast forward, here we are. And this latest correction is only 12 weeks old. So it's relatively young of a move. And you can see the first 8 weeks, we saw much faster of a move to the downside, 70% in the first 8 weeks. And so we saw from there a pretty decent rally, 97%. And so here we are seeing another leg down. I'm not saying it repeats exactly, but what if we have to go down that 85%, similar to the other one, or even 80%, right? So 80% would put us, well, let's look at support levels first, right? The first level of support, big level in terms of key support levels, are right around that 5K mark here. That was the last big base, and then 3. And those are the two major levels of support on this weekly chart. Doesn't mean we have to go there. We could certainly bounce before then, like we saw back here. But if we go down 80% from the top, this is 76% to that first support level. 80% puts you right in the middle between these two. And then that 3K mark puts you right at 85%. And so very interesting to see how those could correlate. Now, I don't want to see 3K BTC as much as I'd be buying there. I'd rather just not see that. And so it's going to be interesting to see how long this culminates and how low it gets. Now, time-wise, like I said, we're only 12 weeks in. And what we need to see, regardless of how low the price goes, even if it settles out around here, we need to see a new period of accumulation. The last one took 60 weeks. I'm not expecting that, because that takes us clear into 2019. Let me move this out a little bit. I'm expecting something shorter in terms of the consolidation phase here, but the last one took 59 weeks before it hit bottom. That would put us at around January month end of 2019, and so that'd be the 59-week mark. Now, what we do need to see, regardless of how low the price goes, I don't think it's going to take a year to hit bottom. I don't expect that. I think it'll bottom before that. But we do need to see this. We need to see a period of accumulation, a new base, because markets move in cycles. And you had the big climactic run, then you have the initial pullback, then you have a bounce, and you have the new base. But ultimately, markets will form a base that looks like this, where it's a range and it's an extended period of time. You're talking a couple of months at least, where it begins to build a new base. And this is the new accumulation zone that precedes the next bull run. And so we have not seen this yet, right? It's very unusual to see markets do, after a parabolic move like the one we saw, it's very unusual to see the big pullback and then just straight up to new highs. That is very unusual. You generally will see the pullback and then some sort of accumulation phase before we start the next bear or the next bull run. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to see this type of pattern, this type of accumulation happen. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to happen a year and a half later. It doesn't need to take that long, and maybe that's happening here at these levels, but wherever the price is, we've yet to see that, right? So could that happen here between 11 and 9K or 10K? Maybe. Could it happen down here between this base? And that's the big question, right? Nobody knows ultimately, except for the Mt. Gox guy, because he's going to know when he stops selling. So I'm kidding there. But that's the thing, right? So it's very interesting to compare the two scenarios. Markets rhyme. They never repeat exactly. So I certainly wouldn't take the 2014 scenario, extrapolate it forward, and say that's exactly how it's going to happen, because that's never the way it works. It's always similar stories because it's market psychology. It's the same patterns that we see play out regardless of the markets generally, but it's going to be interesting. So it's in the court order. Okay, we'll have to see. Hopefully they're done right, but that's still a lot of overhead supply that Mt. Gox has. But so yeah, that's my thoughts on the weekly chart. Now, the good news is this big reversal week set up that bounce. We saw that. Now we got to see if the next test to the low where it holds. So let's go back to the daily chart here. I'm going to put the bear goggles on, so I don't want to freak everybody out, but you got to look at both sides here. So we had this double top, and just doing a strictly measured move from this double top pattern. You can use this top. Usually you want to use the bigger top here, but they're pretty close. And so if you say from the top to the neckline, where does that go? From the breakout point, you project that down, and that says around $7,500. And so that's where the projection from this pattern would play out. Now, that's just a purely technical move. You don't necessarily need to say that it hits there every time, and but that's kind of the ballpark. Now, if you do another way, let's do a fib retracement off of this big bounce we saw. You can see we had that first rally. We pulled back almost exactly to that 382 level, rallied again, and then unfortunately we failed and formed that double top. And so the next level down could be this next fib level here around 8,100, and then below that, the big retracement, the 786, is 7,200, and kind of in line with that. So at this point, because we've already seen the pullback, the first bounce pullback, I wouldn't be doing too much on the fib side as far as weightings here. And so a couple of levels there, but if you look at just strictly horizontal price support, the first one was that neckline that broke. The next one was this 9K area or so. We undercut that pretty good here. We've rallied above it. Let's see if we can hold on a closing basis. That would be very positive if we can touch it or close above it and then go from there, because then that'll really establish that level of support. And then below that It's a little bit more of a zone, a range, and I'll highlight that here. But it's going to be that 8,200 down to around that $8,000 mark or so. And so those are the horizontal price points that I'm looking at in terms of potential support levels. And so we'll see if we can rally off of this 9K and set up a bounce. But ultimately, on the upside, we got to retake that $9,600 mark or so, and then clear this moving average and start to change the trend. So right now, the trend is certainly not our friend. The momentum is definitely to the downside here in the near term, and all rally attempts have been sold into. Unfortunately, they've been nothing but a bounce. This is still in play, this big hammer reversal. And so if we can end higher here and start to rally again, that would still set up a very good bullish candle. Even though it's red, the fact that it finished so high off of the lows with big volume is bullish in terms of the chart patterns there. So that's what I'm looking for on the BTC side. Let's zoom in a little bit here. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce attempt. Well, there's a green bar. I don't know if it's called a bounce attempt so far. The problem is the volume. That's really what I've been not too impressed with. The sell side volume continues to be very heavy. The bull side volume, look at that big green bar there. Granted, it was a Friday evening, but still, that's a strong move up. Not as much volume as you would like to see. Something like this is much stronger, but again, that happened near the top. Not what you want to see generally, because it signifies a little bit of profit taking near the tops. And so I'm watching the volume there to see if we can start to see a little bit more strength in terms of price action, volume price action there. So, all right, let's see here. I've been going just about 20 minutes, not too bad. Let me look at a couple of the big names, and then we'll take a look at some of your guys' charts and go from there. So I'm going to switch over here to the different charts. So going to, I'm going to stay on Bitstamp just because it's easy for me to cycle through some of these names. Let me take off that moving average there. Just look at price for now. But Ethereum. So looking at FBTC first, starting with the daily chart, I've been watching, and this is still potentially in play, I've been watching this little bit of a double bottom trying to form on the daily chart. Second bottom, a little bit more rounded, but you can see it's trying to establish a low versus BTC there after a very nice pullback here. And we're seeing a little bit of divergence on the RSI. You can see that first low, RSI went lower than the second low, and now it's starting to head up a little bit. But we're seeing the resistance again show up at that exponential moving average, just like it has in the past. And so for now, this is just a bounce attempt off of a low. But if it can really start to turn the corner here and gain momentum, that would be good, not just for ETH, but the alts in general, because this one just tends to be a little bit of a bellwether in terms of how the alt market performs all around. And when ETH is strong versus BTC, we see the alts tend to also be strong and outperform. And right now, as you guys know, across the board, there's always exceptions, but across the board, the story has been alts have just been pretty weak here in terms of holding up versus Bitcoin. And that's not good, because Bitcoin has been selling off and the alts have been getting hit even harder. But that's what I'm watching on ETH here near term. And you can see the volume has been very strong here at the lows. Let me move that up here. Just very strong accumulation volume here as it's trying to turn the corner. And this most recent action is actually pretty positive here, because we had that little bit of a move higher versus Bitcoin. And let me highlight that here. And you can see that was trying to set up a little bit of a base. We broke out above that base. We rallied higher. And if we can pull back and just hold above this line and start to rally higher, that's going to set up a very nice secondary entry point, in my opinion, on ETH versus BTC. But if BTC continues lower, I think all around you're usually better off just kind of staying on the sidelines versus jumping in too soon. You can see the USD pair on ETH. It's taken a hit along with BTC, but let's see if that BTC chart can start to outperform. But look at this. I mean, the volume up here, pretty light volume, pretty weak. You can see how it was just really drifting lower here as this thing paused, and we're seeing the volume come in, unfortunately, as it starts to sell off. So from that perspective, not looking too good. Could it set up an inverted head and shoulders on this chart? Potentially, but until we see it really start to form a little bit better, I would remain cautious. And what I'm watching here is a little bit more of a slanted pattern here with this most recent pullback, potentially forming that right shoulder. So let's see how that plays out over the next couple of days here this weekend. So that's what I'm going to be watching. And maybe that'll set up a nice inverted head and shoulder on this 4-hour chart, which could correspond with a potential breakout on the BTC chart. So keep an eye on this pattern here, because like I said, if this one starts to look stronger, I think a lot of the other alts will also begin to look stronger. Let's jump over to Litecoin. And so this one, similar pattern. You can argue that this one also is potentially trying to form a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders. Not as clean, but still not a bad pattern here. You can see it's a little bit messier. There's some more wicks there, but let me fix that here real quick. This second rise in the middle here didn't get quite as high, so maybe you start the shoulder back here, but nonetheless, very similar in nature with a low, a lower low, and then potentially right now establishing a higher low, which is a good bottoming reversal type pattern. These are the type of patterns you want to see at the lows as things start to recover and reverse. You can see the RSI has been very strong on this one, but the thing I don't like is the volume here, right? The volume on the rise has been pretty weak, and so we got to see some of that really recover. But versus BTC, this one had a very strong run. Right now, in my opinion, this is a pretty good secondary entry versus BTC after that big run. It gave you a nice little pullback, enough to cool off the RSI a little bit here in the near term, and looking like it wants to start bouncing off of that moving average. So Litecoin is definitely the strongest of the big three here in recent days. Here's the daily pattern, right? Kind of the bigger picture, starting to curl a little bit off the right side. Let's see if this can continue higher, but this one has been very strong and outperforming here in the near term. So, all right, so that's those are the biggies. Bitcoin Cash, it's pretty much just been following suit, and versus BTC continues to just drift lower in the big picture here. You can see that is not pretty. Just the overall big picture in Bitcoin Cash has been pretty weak relative to BTC. It's trying to establish a little bit of a low here, but there's certainly no upside confirmation yet. I would, until this changes, if it were me, I'm leaning Litecoin or ETH. So, all right, let me take a look at a couple more here real quick. I'm going to hop over in my other screen and multi-Slack here. Hold on here. Radio silence. So I have a question for you guys, just because I want to know where your thoughts are in terms of Bitcoin and ICOs and some of these, just the tokens in general. Are they commodities? Are they securities or something else? What are your thoughts on that here? All right, I had to post a message on another screen here. Sorry, guys. So there, I had another question here too about shorting Bitcoin. Would I short it? And so I'll certainly cover my philosophy on shorting. There's certainly nothing wrong with shorting, but you got to know how to do it. And I'll show you guys where I would have shorted if I was doing it right now. I'm not right now, but certainly don't have anything against shorting. But here's what I would be looking at. So it's a security. I think there's there's some aspects of it being a commodity, but yeah, I agree with you, Simon. It's a new asset class, right? It's different than just a normal stock security, right? Normal stock securities, it's just kind of you own part of the company, the dividends there. Crypto, it could be that, but it could also be tokens that you need for the platform. It could be programmable. It could be, rewards based. So it's just so much different from that perspective. And I do think they're a new asset class. And I think we're seeing SEC and governments trying to apply just some standard nomenclature and standard regulation to something that's just so different, right? And it's similar to like what we saw on the internet with, you know, internet at first was, oh, it's a fancy phone and a fax machine, and it's a letter that's electronic, and it's just so much more than that, right? And data now has become so different. You have to establish different laws for data and for privacy and for what can be shared and what can not, and what can be captured, and spam, and you know. So I think we're seeing something similar. They should be called oddities. That's a good one here. Oh man. You know, and then their security, their cryptos are, you know, there's the blockchain aspect of it too. That's just not, people aren't even talking about that in terms of regulation, right? They want the technology, but they want to stifle the token side of it. So, all right, let's see here. Shout out to the Crypto Bit Brothers. The old boys have been bringing you up. Hey, the Crypto Bit Brothers. I've been on their show a few times. They're a fun couple of guys, man. I need to be on more shows, so I'm gonna start emailing you guys and reaching out, and then I'll be on the camera too, so you guys will get to see my ugly mug. Definitely not today though, because I just got back from the gym, and you definitely don't want to see my ugly mug now. All right, so let me go to, there was a question on shorting BTC here. Let me go to my other screen. All right. So when you short, now clearly you want to short when something looks weak, not when it looks strong. Like for example, shorting into the parabolic move is crazy in my opinion, because you don't know how high this is going to go, even though you think, hey, this is overbought, it's way overdone. While that may be true, just wait until the trend changes before you start shorting, right? So that's the first rule, is just you want to know for sure that that the top is in before you even start looking at the bear side. Doesn't mean you can't, like if you're long, I mean, there's one thing to sell and take profits. It's another thing to go short completely, right? And so when you short, generally, you want to know the top is in, so you wait for a decent pullback, and then you short going into the bounce where you start to see these levels of resistance. And so similar to buying the dip, you short the bounce, right? So it's like the opposite of when you're buying a pullback and you think, okay, we're near support or it's coming off of support, that's when you start to go long. It's similar like that to shorting. You don't want to short after it's already broke down, because then your risk is a lot higher there from a trading perspective. And so, you know, in this most recent run up, you know, ideally, if you were looking at short, the place to short was this massive resistance point here that we were looking at, because we have tested it, we pulled back, we tested it, we pulled back, we tested it. And, you know, there you're thinking, okay, if it breaks out, then you cover your short relatively quickly. But if it fails, you know, that's a pretty decent pullback. And then here in the most recent time frame, if you're looking at shorting something like this, then you short another point of resistance, and that would have been a bounce into this neckline right here. Sorry about that. Let me fix that. You know, right here, and you short into something like that. The problem with shorting now, however, is the fact that we're relatively oversold versus where we were near, you know, up here we weren't oversold, so there was room to the downside. Down here we could still go lower, but the risk is higher. If you look at the 4-hour chart, RSI is kind of near the low end. You know, you certainly don't short down here, right? When it looks like the bottom is falling out and we've already fallen 10-20%, you don't go short down here. That's just crazy risk. You're oversold, you're due for a bounce, so don't short into that. So you look for places like that where it kind of bounces into that. So shorting is a lot harder, in my opinion, than it is to go long and to trade on breakouts and stuff like that, especially because you have to cover your short, and you see how fast the markets move here, and when they go up, they can really take out. But right now, the trend is leaning bearish, and so odds favor downside pressure until this really starts to reverse. And I'm watching this right here. See if we can establish a higher low in and around that 9,000, 8,900 mark, and see if we can start to bounce. This current 4-hour bar has 13 minutes left to go. We'll see how this plays out. I'll end the live stream as this bar closes, and then we'll go from there. All right, let's look at the alts. And so there's a lot of questions around, hey, what's the best alts? What are we doing there? And so let me pick some of the ones that have just been really selling off. We'll look at the big names, right? Kind of going down the market cap list. Some of the bigger ones off the top. Cardano, been talking about that for a while. Selling off pretty good here. If you look at the daily picture, I mean, this pullback has been significant in terms of percent move. Already down 75% after the highs. Now, there's a good argument to be made that this was just way overvalued up here. I think at the peak, it was like $30 billion market cap or something. So that was just crazy for where the project is right now. Longer term, though, if you like the project, if you believe in what they're doing, and they've got some pretty smart people working on it, and they're trying to solve some pretty good problems in the blockchain ecosystem. So if this is going to turn out to be one of those, bigger projects that do survive the test of time and begin to see more adoption, then you start looking at these projects here near these lows because this is, a big pullback. By all accounts, technically speaking, we are in oversold conditions, but you can remain down here for an extended period of time. But we're certainly hitting some of these levels on the downside in terms of, versus BTC. So this is one I'm looking at potentially as an entry, as it's, but I'm always waiting for these things to start to confirm that they've already tried to establish a pretty good low and setting up a different entry there. I'm not so much worried about, I got to get the lowest price, the exact bottom. I'd rather have the momentum in my favor. And that means sometimes I pay a little higher, but at least from a timing perspective, I'm in during the kind of the move, right? The momentum to the upside. And so that's how I'm using Cardano as an example. And as we go through some of these charts, they're all going to have a very similar look. And so the same approach applies, right? And everyone's going to have a different opinion on the project. And some people like one project more than they like another. And that's cool. I mean, that's, kind of pick your poison, as they say. But from a timing perspective, the same lessons could apply in terms of when you start looking and when you start to get in. So another one, right? EOS has had a similar pullback off the top. I can certainly understand the concern with EOS and the year-long ICO that they did and how that was working. But here's another one, right? That's had a big pullback, a long correction, not quite as deep, but this one's still 50%. And another thing to look at is it's right here near this base. And so in and around this zone, potentially it finds another low, which is where it found some pretty good support here. And I like the volume on the way up here. So there was a lot of people stepping in down below these levels. Not a ton of volume up here in this section. And now we're starting to reach these lows. And also it's very oversold near term. And so potentially we start to see some reversals in some of these. If you zoom in a little bit, this is the 4-hour chart of EOS over the last few days. And you're seeing some accumulation type of patterns here at the lows, some big volume coming in as it starts to sell off. And so it's being defended here, at least near term. And so that's something I'd be paying attention to. Let me go through the list here. There's some other ones. Obviously, we covered the big ones, ETH, Litecoin. Let's look at Dash. I've noticed Dash doesn't quite get as much attention as you would think in the crypto community, some of these other names, for whatever reason. Do you guys like Dash? Just curious. But this one's got a much choppier look, not as constructive of a pullback, and certainly just moves. I mean, just moves a lot differently. USD side, certainly not looking as strong as some of the others either. The bounce here was much weaker than some of the other names that we've seen. So some people like Dash, some people don't. Yeah, it's kind of one of those, like, a lot of people don't like it for whatever reason. They hate it, and some people really like it. And I'm just surprised that for being such a big market cap name, we don't get a lot of fan base. NAM is another one, just because they have the big supply, they're a big market cap too. But there's another one that doesn't get as much love. But NAM is another one here that they had that whole thing with the hack, and this initial pop a couple of days ago, big volume move off the low, corresponded with news that they were going to reimburse people that were impacted by that loss on the hack. And so maybe we see some more follow through, and perhaps that signified the low on the NAM versus BTC chart. And this one was one that was just crazy oversold, and also down huge from the peak here last year. So this one came down almost 80%. And so, man, I hope none of you guys are buying NAM here at the top, because that is painful. That is just a crazy move to the downside. And that just, if you're new to crypto and you're buying crypto, and I get the FOMO, and I understand that, and it's just normal, psychology. And there's nothing wrong with buying after it's had a decent move up, but at some point you got to let them go. And whoops. And NAM is a good example, right? It had that initial pop, and then it pulled back, and it started to rally. But if you're chasing something after it's up 800% in less than a month, that is huge risk. And so sometimes you just got to sit on your hands and don't chase these crazy moves, because inevitably you're going to be buying near the highs, and there's always a pullback. Even if it's not 80%, there's always a pullback. And so it's just high risk. And so you guys hear me talk about that all the time, is just don't chase these, because they're just huge risk. And then you're sitting on some bags that are down 60, 70, 80%, and it's painful. And that's even more when you look at the USD pair, because this is versus BTC. It's down 80%, much more on the USD side. So let's go through a couple more names here. NEO. I'll do NEO BTC first. This one had a nice run. I know there's been some FUD and some stuff on NEO. I still like NEO long term. I still am a believer in this one. And as far as, is it a good place to look at it here? $100 NEO, sub $100 NEO. It sounds attractive, but the USD price, the chart is just, it's still looking weak. And I'd be watching the RSI personally. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to see where this thing bottoms out. And we'll see how low that goes price-wise by the time this bottoms out. But in terms of specific prices that I'm looking at, maybe we retrace completely back to this base here. I'm not expecting a retrace down to here. So I'm kind of looking at it here in this little, it's a wide range, but see if it can bottom out, between now and maybe the high 60s or so. And so that's what I'd be looking at from a USD side. Now, the action in BTC is going to drive this for now, just because NEO versus BTC is not outperforming either. It's trying to find a low here near term. You can see there's a little bit of a flag being put in, but at this point, it kind of just looks like a bear flag, bear pennant. It's had that leg down. It's just kind of going sideways here. What tends to happen is this moving average catches up, and then you see another leg down. So I'd be cautious on NEO right now. Worst thing you ever did was buy Chaincoin. Yeah, probably. There's worse things that you could do than buy Chaincoin. Don't know what they are though. Let's see, NEO, Ripple. Let me take a look at Ripple. Personally, I don't hold Ripple. I'm just not a fan of Ripple. I've traded it for sure. I'll do some trades on it, but as far as keeping this as a long-term hold, it's just one I don't. And when I was watching this thing pop last year, I was thinking, well, maybe I should have reconsidered Ripple, but I didn't, and kind of glad I didn't. But Ripple, it's still doing this my sailboat pattern here that I was talking about a couple of weeks ago, and it's still not looking strong here versus BTC. So very similar, very interesting to see this pattern. Let me see if I can do it here with here we go. You saw that, and then you saw a similar price rise here last year, and it's interesting to see that this descending triangle pattern, is playing out at almost the exact same horizontal price support level versus BTC. And we've just dipped below it. We're trying to rally, but right now what we're doing is we're rallying right into that support level that it broke down from. And what tends to happen is it's a bounce into that resistance, and then we see another leg down, right? So if you're able to short Ripple, right, that's kind of where you look at it, is you short into that bounce into resistance, because odds favor we'll see some more downside. Now, if it breaks through resistance, that's very positive. If you're short, you cover there, but that's how you look at that. But Ripple versus BTC, the big picture is just not pretty. It's not looking very strong here. So definitely not one of my top charts. Let me jump ahead. Monero. Man, Monero was looking really good, and saw a pretty good smackdown here over the last day or so with the rest of the market. But I'm watching to see how this plays out. The level that I was watching it when it first, I was really watching to see if it would break out, was this little bit of a consolidation that it was putting in. And right now it's still in play. I don't like the fact that it had a high volume reversal following the breakout, but right now it's still in play because it's been a breakout, pulling back right to that trend line. But we'll see if it can hold up. You don't like them when they break out and then just kind of really give it all up. It's kind of a failed breakout, but it's still one of the stronger charts versus BTC. So you can't completely write it off. I mean, most other charts, they look like this, right? Versus BTC, they've kind of had the big pullback over multiple months. Monero is one of the few that just continues to go up in this 45-degree angle type of pattern over the last couple of months. So I don't think you can write it off just yet. Nano was very strong yesterday. Let's take a look at Nano. Man, seeing a pretty good volume reversal off of that high here yesterday. How far down are we from that point? We are down about 10% versus BTC. It's right at the 10 EMA here. So caught the joke. Guess you sorry guys, I'm trying to keep up on these on the comments, but it's definitely tough to chart and talk at the same time and look at the comments. I can chew gum and talk and walk at the same time, but charting isn't different. So pound that like button, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Let's see here. Thanks for joining, Trade Devil. We'll see you on the next one. Here, let me jump in here. I got messages here on the other side. All right. So we see here. So Nano, I'm looking at this as a potential secondary entry. I don't like the fact the volume was so big on the reversal, but it's definitely one. BNB, sorry. It's definitely one I'm keeping an eye on. Same chart versus BTC, but I think it's one to watch here. This is not a good sign near term. Big 4-hour reversal, and it looks like that candle just ended. But I think it's one to be watching here over the intermediate term. Young chart here on the Binance side, right? Just had that big pullback, so we'll see if we can start to form a new base. Had that nice run. Omise Go. Look at the OMG here. This one's been all over the place here, unfortunately. It was setting up very nicely here versus BTC. I was really liking this pattern here. And then it had a pretty decent breakout, but unfortunately that was a failed breakout. We saw the breakout happen there. Very strong volume came in on the breakout. Exactly what you want to see. I mean, everything was pointing to the right direction. You can see there was some accumulation happening on the way up. But hey, these things happen. That's why you got to employ the use of stops when you're trading. That's why you've got to have a plan B and a plan A. You have your upside targets, but you also got to have a what happens if this doesn't work out, because a lot of times it doesn't. And it's about probabilities and putting the risk reward ratio into your favor, but you got to always manage the losses. And so this had a big pullback. Yesterday, we saw a very nice outside bar reversal. Look at the price action here. We undercut the prior day and we finished much stronger. And so I'm watching this. We're seeing a little bit of a pullback here on this daily, but this could still finish strong, right? We could, we're starting the next day here, so excuse me. But I'd be looking at potential reversal there still. You can see here on the hourlies, it's just a little bit of a pullback, and we're trying to establish a little bit of a low. And so we'll see. I still hold some Monero, or excuse me, some Omise Go in my longer term holds. And so, but I've been holding that for some time now, and I got in a lot earlier. So it's not still in the positive here. I was really hoping this would have broke out and made some new highs on the USD side. Let me go to the USD equivalent here. Not looking good on the USD chart here, unfortunately. We're bouncing right into that moving average, which also happens to be a level of resistance. So unless it can get back above $16 relatively quickly here, it's leaning bearish right now, and the chart has some room to go to the downside, unfortunately. So keep an eye on this one. If it starts to have another leg down, I may have to cut some more loose from my longer term holds if it doesn't look like it's going to want to continue higher. All right, let's see here. Let me go through a couple more of these. I'll pick some names. I'll kind of cherry pick a few names here. BQX. Man, what's with this long wick? I hate when they do that. It's like, wow. Usually that takes out all those stops here, but near term, I mean, just a ton of downside action here. What happened to that thing? Holy smokes. Really messes up the charts. Let me do this here real quick. Got to readjust all this manually when you see that kind of action. Get those long wicks. Look at that volume, though. Man, that's just a ton of selling volume here in the last week or so. And so I'd be cautious with this one. This one just, it's looking weak. It's feeling like it wants to see some more downside action. And the strong support level is going to be right here, which we're pretty close to. How far are we percent-wise? We're another 5% or so. And so I'd be looking at that as the kind of the floor. If it doesn't hold that or just below that, sometimes they undercut slightly and then close above. But if it can't hold, I'd be cautious on this guy because it's not looking too strong right now. Let's see here. 0x. You know, that was having a big day yesterday. Let's see how 0x looks right now. 0x is looking pretty good here off the lows finally after that big pullback. Look at that daily chart of 0x. Just a significant pullback. Happens to be right now right at this base prior last consolidation before the big breakouts. And so maybe that's it, hopefully, on the downside. And we start to see some positive action. But we've seen attempts before, right? You've seen this attempt here. You saw this little attempt here. And for the most part, that's all they were, is bounces into some of this. And so until it gets above that moving average, I'm still cautious. But I think this is something to keep an eye on here as a potential bottom point for 0x. So let's see here. Altcoin coins aside, does it technical analysis? What's the question there? Does its TA give you any to look at? Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question, my friend. We just covered EOS. Let me see. I'm going through the list here. Lumens. I'll take a look at Lumens. Sorry, I'm reading two screens at once. All right, 0x. Anyway, 0x. I think I like the project longer term, and so I'm going to be watching it here as potential reversal and a potential addition to the node folio. So we'll see how that goes. Waves. Let's see here. You know, it's Saturday. We can have fun. I like you guys kind of entertaining and being a little funny today. It's after a long week, you know, you got to keep things light. And I try to do that just because it's too easy to get caught up and crazy in some of this stuff here. Waves was having some good action here the last couple of days. but unfortunately, it's hitting a wall right now. And you can see, I mean, a lot of these times, it's just crazy how often happens, but you see this prior base down here, big rally finally broke through. They bounce right into that. I mean, just look at that. And support and resistance are just fundamental when it comes to technical analysis. You got to understand how support and resistance work. And they're not always horizontal. Sometimes you got trend lines that act as support and resistance, but this is just very common to see, right? Where you see a break, then you see a big bounce, and then you see the resistance show up. Doesn't mean it's over, but it's so common to see the pauses happen around those type of levels. But right now, this one's getting really tight here on this daily chart, so I'd still be watching it. But it's got these long wicks on both sides, so it's just been very volatile here as of late. But if you can start to close above that line, then that'd be a good positive sign that maybe it's starting to turn the trend here on the wave side. Let me go to the Bittrex exchanges because it's got a lot more history. But you can see the overall big picture downtrend is certainly still in play on waves. You can see that's been in a pretty big correction since middle of last year. It's nowhere near the highs, so got to keep an eye on that. Let's see here. VeChain. The VeChain. This one again. I continue to say this one just needs more time. After that massive run it had late last year, it's just continuing to consolidate how low it goes. I mean, right now we're at a key support level, in my opinion, and below this, there really aren't a lot of levels that are considered bases or consolidation. I mean, maybe you can say here, but that's not very strong compared to something like this where it based out for a week. The last big base before that was down here, and everything in between is just kind of no man's land here in terms of potential, pullback zone. So you just got to watch the price volume action. You can do fib retracements and different type of analysis to project some potential downside targets. And right now we're right at the 50% mark. The 618 is a little bit lower here, so maybe we see that on the next leg down. But that's still 18% lower there. So I would just be watching for this thing to finally reverse. It looked like it was doing it here a couple days ago, and it still may be building a little bit of a double bottom. Let me clear this so it makes it easier to read here. And so maybe that is the low, and it would be nice that it corresponds with this little base here. But you can see we had this pretty good volume action come in, but then it sold off, undercut slightly, but we've closed higher here on the daily chart, and we're just kind of starting to go sideways versus BTC. And so if this holds and we start to see some upside confirmation, I'd like to see it get back above this moving average and ultimately getting above this. That would establish a very good little double bottom on the daily chart, and maybe that's the low. And then so the next big test above that is going to be, this resistance around here. So that's what, another 20 to 26% above current price levels. But maybe that's it. Maybe that's the low, but it's still not confirmed. So I'd be cautious on this here. So appreciate all the feedback, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys joining me on this Saturday, Sunday afternoon, whatever day time it is in your neck of the woods. It's always fun to get on here and chat with you guys and keep the crypto community engaged. This week has been pretty wild, to say the least, and all of us are ready for the next nice alt run to happen already. And so hopefully we're getting close here. Let me look at Link here. Chaincoin, I'm not going to look at that one. I mean, those coins, they may look like they've bottomed just because they flatlined, but you got to look at the market. Is there any hope for them ever being bullish? It's one thing if they bottomed, but it's another thing is, are they ever going to be bullish again? I don't think anything like Chaincoin is ever going to be bullish again. Link. So Link was seeing some pretty good action here off the lows. Again, not confirmed yet, but you saw that big reversal, pretty decent volume coming in here. Let me go to the 4-hour charts. And it's trying here, right? You're seeing a little bit of accumulation happen here near the lows and starting to rally. So we'll see if this can continue. But this one has had a pretty decent pullback. and I'd be watching this one here as a potential reversal. NASDAQ. I saw some gold and silver too. And so, yeah, you know, I follow those charts for sure. I don't cover them a whole lot on my channel. Maybe I will later and keep a different segment for that type of stuff. But many of you guys know who've been around for a long time know that I was pretty big into the metals markets in terms of trading for a long time. The time frames here you got to watch are a lot longer. And I'm watching this big long-term weekly chart on silver right now play out a potential falling wedge. If we break above this trend line, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. Gold looks very bullish. Man, sorry about these charts. These are hard to read. Gold potentially trying to break out above this resistance point here. And so I'm watching that. If we can see gold break out above that, that could be pretty bullish there. Here is the projections that I'm looking at here. Gold can close above, you know, ultimately, if we can get back into $1,400 mark, that'd be huge. And so I'm watching that. On the stocks side of things, you know, they're kind of mixed. They're not looking too strong, even though we've had a pretty good week. I'm watching this in the big picture, right? See this big top? We're making another high, but right now the RSI is just really weak, not confirming on that weekly chart. Same thing on the Dow. So I'm going to be watching to see how it acts as we approach this. We could see another type of double top scenario. NASDAQ is the strongest of the bunch. Has gotten a lot closer to that prior high. But when you look at double tops, generally RSIs are like this. And if it goes higher, but the RSI remains very weak, I will be on alert. I'm not doing anything yet. I did do a little bit of shorting here, took some put options, but I'm not doing anything with the market right now in terms of one way or the other. But got to keep an eye on these patterns because they're not looking too strong here. All right, back to crypto land. Nobody cares about stocks. You guys don't want me to talk about that. We're talking crypto here, ladies and gentlemen. Hit that like button. All right, so going back to BTC here, let's see, can we hold this 9,000 mark here in the near term? Let me switch back to the other charts. It'll be a little bit easier for you guys to see. Actually, I'll just go here. All right, so I'll do a few more. Let me see. Yeah, I covered the SEC statement here at the beginning of my stream. I covered Mt. Gox trustee. I covered Binance. I kind of did a little recap on the week towards the very beginning of my stream. And I went pretty quick, so you might want to check that out. My thoughts on SEC, CFTC, exchange regulation, all that fun stuff. So we'll see here. So this is the 4-hour chart of BTC here. We saw a little bit of a pullback. We've just started a new 4-hour bar 15 minutes ago. And want to see if this thing can finally reverse because, man, we need a green day here. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be 6 if we finish red on the downside. And that'd be probably the biggest streak, down day streak that we've had in several months. So got to see if that 9K give or take level holds. That's kind of the area I'm watching here. Near term, very near term, right, is this little bit of a zone right there. Maybe that's the low of this little test to the downside. Ultimately, we got to get back above this little bit of a resistance. And if we can, that would really start to turn the tides here, at least maybe give us a green day. Maybe. Let's do a couple more here. Substrat. So sub, what is the market cap of this guy here now? Let me go to coin market cap here. I'm just curious. Sub running at these days. $95 million market cap here. So it's had quite the pullback here. Let me pull up the market cap price. I would rather have a new Tundra than a Lambo. Why not both? I've got a Tundra. Pretty nice truck, gotta say. Let's see here. Yeah, that's been quite the pullback down to the lows here. It's trying in recent days to resurge itself. Just that volume has been very interesting to see that coming off the lows here. I mean, just look at that crazy spike off the lows a couple days ago. But not a lot of follow through since then. But somebody wanted a bunch of sub here. down at the lows. So it's kind of interesting to see. Maybe that is the low. It would make sense that it's kind of retraced fully back to this base here that it put in December. And so that was the base prior to the big run up. And we've had a full retracement of that. So maybe that's the low, but until we see some more upside confirmation, I'd be watching that. Lambo, your Lambo's way too small for you, dude. You're 6'3", 200. You know, honestly, guys, you're gonna not agree with me here, but I'm not really a Lambo fan. I'm kind of more in the Ferrari camp, to be honest with you guys. That's kind of been more my choice. So I probably will never buy a Lambo. It's gonna probably be something like a Ferrari. But hey, we could still race, right? We can still check it out. That new Tesla Roadster, you guys could get one of those. Those are pretty sweet looking, actually. All right, let's do a few more here. QSP and Dragon. I will do Dragon. The Italian thing you should buy is a sandwich. Coffee, man, and wine. Italian coffee and wine. All right, let's see here. So that's the level I was watching. It looked like it was going to break. I think I mentioned this in my stream a couple of weeks ago whenever we were seeing this pattern play out. But that's just a big descending triangle pattern. Finally gave way. You can see try to rally right into that support level. And here we are just pulling in a little bit. If we do a measured move on this, that's probably going to be too big. But let's see. Where does that project down from a descending triangle pattern? And that says, man, that says full retracement to the bottom here. And so it's definitely hitting some oversold conditions near term. But like so many of these, I would be waiting for some upside confirmation before doing anything preemptively in terms of a long. If you're long, if you're already holding it, then you've probably already absorbed the brunt of it. In my opinion, the next level down is around that 1253 level. And that's still another, that's another 30% lower. And that's the last big base we had. And like you've seen in some of these other names where they've basically retraced all the way back to that base, because right now we're kind of in no man's land here. There's not a lot of support in that area here. And that's, you know, basically the price zone we're at right now. So the next big low is around 1,300 or so on the Satoshi level. So this is a younger chart. How was the let me see what this one's at. QSP is $100 million market cap. So again, another one that's fallen off quite a bit here in market cap value. It was a 500 million here at the peak, back to 100. So interesting on that one. Let's go. Let's do Dragon. Coin. Yeah, granted, this one, they just added this exchange to this platform, so there's not a lot of history on some of these, but this one, man. So I do hold some Dragon long term, not a ton, but I do hold some, and be interesting here. Let me see. Sorry, I'm reading the comments here. Thinking of New Zealand, Australia. I got to get out there, guys. I got to get out to New Zealand. Let's see here. I will do ZCOIN and I will do fun. But looking at Dragon, this one, you know, this one's pretty volatile. You just have those days where you're like, all right, Dragon's up 15%. Okay, Dragon's down 20%. It's like you can see here in these 4-hour bars off the lows, it was up 31%. Here we are seeing just in a single 4-hour bar down 10%. So it's just so volatile. I think this is more of a longer term play in terms of, you know, long-term project for the year. But we're trying to establish a little bit of double bottom here near term. And so I'm thinking we're close to a low on this one here. If you look at the price action on this guy, I mean, this one's come down quite a bit. But, you know, it's still up here at $250 million. If you look at the BTC price, you know, the last big base before the big run up was way down here at that 6,500 Satoshi level. And right now it's at the, you know, 11.8. And so that would be another that basically be another cut in half if it continues that low on the price side. Now on the USD side, I don't want to do ETH price, I want to do USD. I think $1 for Dragon is probably going to be the low because that just happens to be this prior base back here. And so that's where I'd be looking at it from a longer term perspective. If it starts to base out like it did here around that $1 mark, I may be looking at adding some of that there. Fun. Let's take a look at this guy here. I'm going to go to, no, that's Binance is fine. So this is let me go to the daily chart of Fun here. And man, this, after having such a big run here, just really pulling back, really giving it up. Again, this feels a lot like a descending triangle pattern, but really the big pattern is just the trend line. I'd just be watching the broader trend line. It's, there's not any type of support yet. We saw some good volume coming in here. So maybe that's the low here on Fun, but we're getting pretty narrow in terms of price. Sorry about that. You can see this price action is really starting to come to a little bit of a congestion point here. So if it can break above that trend line here in the next, so let's call it 4 or 5 days, maybe week, it'd be nice to see that reversal start taking place. And this will really start to create some, some more positive bottoming price action versus BTC. This one moves fast though, once it starts going. You can see this single day bar, that was 21% there. And so you see pretty big moves to the upside here, but I'd like to see that trend line taken out first. I mentioned Fun. I said I was going to do something else. ZCOIN, that's what it was. I'll do a couple more, guys. I know I've been going longer than I had planned, and I really appreciate you all joining here. Smash that like button, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll do a couple more here, and we will call it a day. So ZCOIN. Looking at this one here, man, this one is looking really nice back here. That I was about to break out. Still pulling in a little bit. Do I think ZCLASSIC, yeah. I don't know about ZCLASSIC. I'll have to look at that one. Had a nice little counter trend rally, tradable rally, but I'm not hopeful on it long term, honestly. I think it's done. So ZCOIN is one I'm watching. This is a smaller cap name too, but I would really like to see the reversal happen first. It's still almost a $200 million name, and so it's still up there, but no doubt just the pullback. I mean, holy smokes, this thing was at $140 at the end of December, has just really pulled back down to $37. And so if you like it long term, you got to start paying attention to it here around these levels versus BTC. It doesn't look as drastic, but this is, BTC's had quite the pullback as well since December, but this is one I'd be watching here, and it's right at a base here too. So maybe a lot of these are looking this way, right? They're just hitting these retracement levels where they've come back so far all the way down to the lows. And so I'm thinking a lot of these are getting close, maybe not price wise, but time wise, I think they're getting pretty close in terms of establishing some lows. And maybe we finally start to see a little bit of turnaround action in some of these alts. I think some of the bellwethers to watch again are ETH and some of the bigger names, because if these can start to turn around versus BTC and really start to show some outperformance, we may see that confirmed with some bigger moves to the upside on some of these other names. So, okay, let's see here. Are you threatening me about ZCLASSIC? I can't hurt you any more than ZCLASSIC is already. Look at that. Bam. Yeah, I'm not hopeful on this guy. So ZCLASSIC, woo, what a move that was. Wabi, man, poor Wabi's really taking a beating too here. But full retracement on this one here. See if it can finally hold up. Wabi has had quite the pullback here. This, man, the market cap on Wabi is down to like what, 40 or 50 million or something. $46 million market cap. Coming off of a high at, where you at? No? No. Charts still want to be nice here. All right. Moving on. So Wabi, maybe at a low, definitely hit some oversold levels. I'm thinking a lot of these have, and so look at this. I mean, so many of these have done this. See the RSI back here? This is on the daily, and it's just been this full retracement on the RSI down to the low. Now, it doesn't mean it goes straight up from there, but maybe that's the low. Maybe it starts to meander its way down here, and price establishes a little bit of a base before heading higher. So a lot of these, again, I continue to repeat myself, but a lot of these I think are nearing a potential low, at least an intermediate low. Does it mean they go straight up to these old highs here in January? I wouldn't bet on that, but I think there's certainly some potential lows here being put in. Yeah, let's do ICX. So Icon is a project I'm definitely watching this year. I think it's a good project to watch in 2018. I don't like the fact that it finally broke from this base. I was really hoping it would have held that base up there, but man, the bearish action just continues on this one. But again, this one has had a full retracement. RSI is hitting these extremes, and so maybe we finally start to see some reversal action. Go zooming in a little bit on these 4 hours. Hey, you know, could maybe. I'm always looking out for patterns when I see charts. So when you look at bottoms, you're always looking for bottom in action, reversal patterns, double bottoms, triple bottoms, falling wedges, stuff like that. Maybe, just maybe, we see a little bit of an inverted head and shoulder form here. If it can hold this this price range here as a low, then I'd be looking for a potential reversal there with the trend line break on an inverted head and shoulder pattern. Let's see how that projects out if we break out from here. That takes us to around that 34,000 Satoshi level or so, which, you know, that kind of lines up with this resistance point here. So could just be a little bit of a bounce play from the low. I mean, even from the breakout, that's still a 15% move or so. But right now, you just got to wait for this thing to bottom out. There's just there's no signs that it's done yet, unfortunately. So if you're hodling the ICX, there's, you know, you're oversold. So at this point, me personally, I probably wouldn't dump it here at the lows. That's just me. You guys can do, you know, what's best for you, but it's been quite the pullback. And if you're holding from the highs, you've already absorbed most of the pullback, in my opinion. And so you tend to want to wait for a little bit of a bounce at least before you start to offload or shorten your position a little bit. Okay, well, it's about an hour and a half into this. I think I need to wrap it up. Get some food in my belly here. Got from the gym right before the stream. Evelyn Stone in the house. We got some other folks here. So guys, appreciate y'all watching. Hit that like button. Probably won't have any more videos for the rest of the weekend. Next one will probably come out Monday or Tuesday, my time. But I think that's it for now. So cool. I'm just cycling through some of these other names, but I think we covered a lot of the ones that I wanted to cover. So again, let me go to BTC. Let's recap real quick before we wrap it up. Just some of the levels to look at here over the next 2 days, guys. This daily chart, holy smokes, man, come on. This daily chart is just really pulling down. The 2 levels that I was watching here near term, obviously on the upside, we got to get above that resistance around that 9,500 level. 9K was the level I was watching to hold, which was this prior base. So we undercut it. We're testing it again. Want to see 9K hold, but right now the bearish action continues. The RSI still has room to go on the downside before it truly is considered oversold or bottoming out. And so 8,500 or so. And I did a projection at the start of this stream looking at, you know, this double top pattern. How far low does that project? I hope we don't see it, but that projects down to around the low 7K range here. So a couple levels to watch over the next couple of days if you're trading. My recommendation in this market is keep positions small, if any at all. There's nothing wrong with just waiting it out. But if you don't want to, then just keep positions small and certainly keep your stops in place. Patience is the name of the game right now. Just got to wait this one out and see where we finally see some reversals happen. Unfortunately, this is not looking very pretty here in the last half hour, and seeing some more downside action. See if we can get a little bit of a bounce here soon. So that's going to be it for tonight, for today, guys. Appreciate y'all joining. Talk to y'all soon. Take care, everyone.